Rabbi Jonathan mentioned the mystery of days and how all of the recent shakings in America were tied to God's ancient calendar. Explain this.
Yeah, it's amazing when I first saw this, manifesting. And that is, think of the year of shakings, 2020. Okay, what's the first holy appointed day of God in his ancient calendar? It's Passover. Passover is the only feast that has to do with a plague. Think about it.
Right.
And so the thing
but
is,
for those that don't know,
yeah.
it was if you don't let the Jewish people go, which was a biblical mandate that the Jewish people are entitled to the physical land of Israel forever, a plague will come on you, Egyptians. There's the plague.
And it comes on Passover night. And so the people, so when does Passover come? In the spring. Okay, so now Jewish people are all celebrating Passover in their houses, talking about the plague passing through the land, and there's a plague passing through the land. And here's Sid, think about this. Passover is the first time in the history of the world that there was a national lockdown. Think about that.
You're right.
They were commanded.
My family and friends in Israel were upset.
We're told, go into your houses because a plague is passing through your land. So they did. So all the Jewish people are actually reading the story of the plague and the lockdown while there's a lockdown and a plague and they're in their houses. In Israel, they're actually told on that day you have to stay in your house until the morning, first time in 3,000 years. So that's that. Now Passover. Okay, there's so much more in the book, but let me go. Now what's the next? The next major feast is called Shavuot or Pentecost. What is Pentecost? Well, Pentecost is when the Holy Spirit comes, and the Spirit of God is the breath of God. Jesus breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. In Hebrew, the word for spirit, ruach, is breath, the breath of God. So we got breath, and it's also the time when the fire of God came down, the fire, the tongues of fire, the baptism of the fire. It's breath and fire. All these things now become judgment. What's the next shaking of America? It begins with breath. A man says, I can't breathe. And all of a sudden shaking all over America, the riots and they're chanting, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. Fire. What happens across America? Fires. All the cities go on fire. Remember all the shaking. Okay, when did it start? It started the Jewish people on Shavuot, Pentecost, the night of May 28th. They're lighting the candles, saying the blessing of the fire. That is the night it all exploded across the country on the very time. And it led right into Pentecost Sunday. We're talking about the fire of God. That's for us, but there's a fire of judgment as well. So that's that. Now, what's the next one? The next one I just alluded to before, but I'm going to get the next one. We said Feast of Trumpets. Okay. The trumpets are blown. But what is it, and you know this, Sid, from your childhood, from my childhood, it's all about the judgment of God, and it says that he's going to, in his heavenly court, he decides, he makes the decree. So the eyes are to turn to the Most High Court and the judge and the judgment. And what happens? On the Feast of Trumpets, all the eyes of America turn to its highest court, the Supreme Court, when a judge is taken away. It says that God decides on that day who passes from the earth. So the judge is taken away, Judge Ginsburg, and it's really God is the judge. And the thing is that is the very act, as we alluded to, opens the door. Feast of Trumpets is about turning back, turning away from your evil.
Because the replacement voted the right way.
That's what it's going to lead to. And actually, the next holy day was actually Shabbat Shuvah, the day of the turning, when the replacement comes. So it's all and during the Feast of Trumpets, one of the prayers that everybody's praying there, the Jewish people are praying, the prayer says, remove the evil decree. Remove the evil of the decree. Now think of Roe versus Wade, 60 million children. It was the Feast of Trumpets that God began the removal of the evil decree. Who could do this?
It is beyond imagination, this irrefutable evidence put before you that the Bible is from God. How are these mysteries tied to something like January 6th and the events that took place on Capitol Hill? Rabbi?
Well, this is one, Sid, where one of the books I I spoke of here called the paradigm speaks of the leaders of America and how they parallel these ancient leaders. One of them was Trump. Now, this is one example of something that we spoke about 4 years before it happened, and then it came true. It's in the book, but I put it in now, the Josiah mystery, the fulfillment. And here's the thing. Jehu, Trump, you want to understand Trump, understand Jehu. Trump follows the prototype of Jehu.
Explain Jehu for a second.
Jehu is a wild guy. He's unpredictable. Nobody knows what he's going to do. He doesn't. But he's used of God to turn back the fall of a nation and an evil thing. So he comes to power suddenly, crazy. It's all crazy, but he actually turns back to a degree. Okay, now, Trump is, there's so much to this. He actually comes head to head against the nation's former first lady. Jehu did. So did Trump. So did Trump. There's so much, but I won't go into it. But the thing is at one point, I never shared this before, is that Jehu calls for people to come to the Capitol, a national gathering, and this is not about, we're not judging it, I'm just telling you this is the template, this is the mystery. And so then his people are stationed around a great Capitol building, okay? And then the people of Jehu enter the building and storm the building while there's proceedings going on in the building, okay? And I'm not going to go into all the stuff, except I'll say this, okay? At the end of that week of the Capitol Hill riot, so it all happens there. It all happens again. It all replays. At the end of that week, there were the Capitol Police announced how many people they arrested who stormed the building, okay, or part of this. And they said 80 people. They arrested 80, right. 80. Go to the Bible. You'll see the word about Jehu. You'll see Shmonim Ish. It says the number of people that went into the building were 80 men. Now the thing is, I'm going to throw in more, okay, just the time we have. That is it's this war between Jehu and the Temple of Baal. Remember, Jehu was against Baal. Baal was about child sacrifice. So Donald Trump, whatever you think of him, became the president more than any other who set in motion the ending of Roe versus Wade. I mean, because that's all in Jehu. But another thing, Sid, strange thing, it's like a warfare between Baal and Jehu, that when Trump was rising to the presidency, when he announced his presidency, the Temple of Baal in the Middle East actually fell to the ground 2 months later. And then when he was about to become president, the Arch of Baal appears in New York City. We actually filmed it. It's actually on the DVD. It's actually filmed. And then remember they had the hearings about Kavanaugh, because it was about abortion. They didn't want it. That was part of the overturn. Well, as they're having the hearings, now the Arch appears in Washington, right in front of the Capitol building. This is a war between Baal.
Just clarify about what did it say?
It was the Arch of Baal, which is the recreation.
What is the Arch of Baal?
The Arch of Baal. It was the recreation of the Arch of Baal from the Temple of Baal that was in the Middle East that fell when Trump announced his candidacy. Now they recreated it, and it appears in Washington and New York. And the thing is that even after he was out of office, Sid, it's what he did by appointing those three ones, particularly Amy Barrett, the one vote, the child of the Nile, we'll get into, actually pulled down the House of Baal, Roe versus Wade.
Could Haman, Mordecai, and Esther actually hold the key to the events that changed America's history? Rabbi Jonathan said that many of these mysteries are tied to specific events that happened on specific days in the Bible, but they also correspond to the exact days of recent events. What do you mean?
In the book of Esther, Haman, the evil man that rises, he issues a decree to bring death and destruction to the Jewish people. Okay, now that decree is linked to the month, is dated at Adar 13, or the 13th day of the 12th month. Okay, now this is something I just saw, Sid. The day we spoke about this evil decree of abortion, the day that Roe versus Wade was heard at the Supreme Court, was December 13th. It was the 13th day of the 12th month, the day of the evil decree. That's when it came. Now, but in the book of Esther, an answer comes, Mordecai, and they issue a second decree to nullify the first decree, and so there actually was another case that came up and that actually nullified Roe versus Wade. It was called Dobbs versus Jackson, and that's what overturned abortion. So you got the evil decree, then you have this. Well, the day that Mordecai issued the good decree that nullified the evil decree was the day called Sivan 23. In the Hebrew, the 23rd day of the month of Sivan. That day became a day in the Jewish world to pray for the reversing of evil decrees. So all around the world. Okay, now the day that Dobbs versus Jackson was sent to the Supreme Court, it was June 15th, 2020. But on God's calendar, it was Sivan 23, the day of undoing the evil decree, the day of the second document that undoes the first document. So while it's going to undo Roe versus Wade on the day of undoing the evil decree, and the Jewish people are praying, Lord, undo the evil decree. God has it all in his hand. I mean, it's amazing. And I'm gonna throw this in. I didn't plan on this, but because there's so much, but to say that also that decree, when you look at that case that undid Roe versus Wade, everything follows the same mystery of the Jubilee, but redemption. For instance, it goes to the court, not just on the day, 50 years to when Roe versus Wade did. It is accepted by the court 50 years from Roe versus Wade to the month. It is given a hearing 50 years to Roe versus Wade to the month. It is actually even leaked. Remember the leak in this?
Yes.
It was leaked 50 years from when Roe versus Wade was leaked. And finally, when Roe versus Wade was overturned, it was overturned right in the middle of its Jubilee, the year of Jubilee, the year that God undoes, reverses, and brings redemption.
You know, Jonathan, when you see all of these, now, you've just heard a few, but when you see all of these and you know you haven't even scratched the surface, how can someone say, I don't believe the Bible is from God? Impossible.
Yeah, and you know what? I didn't even say this. You know, there was a day in the Bible when the people in exile came back to Israel. They started rebuilding the temple, but opposition they stopped working on God's thing. And so Haggai, the prophet, comes to them and says, "There's a curse on the land because you stopped. It stopped the well." They say, "Okay, we're gonna rebuild it." They rebuild it. The day that the curse was broken was the 24th day of the 6th month. Okay, 24th day of the 6th month. Okay. Roe versus Wade was overturned on the 24th day of the 6th month, the day of breaking the curse. The day, who could do that? And another thing, Sid, there's something called the child of the Nile, and I'll mention this. And I'll just say the principle quickly, and that is that, you know, Moses was the baby, when they were killing babies, he was the baby who went on the Nile, who could have been killed. He survived, he grows up to undo all those things. You know, he's the one who broke the power of Egypt that tried to kill him. Well, could there have been a baby born during that initial slaughter of children that actually grew up to overturn? Well, there was, and her name was Amy Barrett. She was born right in the midst of it. When she was born right in between the hearings of Roe versus Wade in the Supreme Court, she grew up. Trump appointed her on the day of the trumpet, at that moment when everything's coming together. Remember, on the day of the turning, Shuvah, she comes to it. Basically most of her first year in office, it's her Jubilean year. And she votes to overturn Roe versus Wade. She's the casting vote, the one vote on her Jubilee. She's 50 years old when it happens. And that all converges. We're talking about God is real.
Irrefutable proof. Now, earlier, Rabbi Jonathan spoke about a supernatural event that he witnessed that changed the history of America. We have that footage. Rabbi, give us a brief understanding.
Yeah, this was the day that, remember we said all the holy days kind of lead up. Well, this is the holy day of Shabbat Shuvah in the year of the plague, the first year. And we had this gathering. God says,
the repentance.
It says return. We had the gathering in the National Mall, return. It was called, the day turned out to be Shabbat Shuvah, the day of the return or the turning of a nation. God appoints it for the turning of a nation. On that actual day, Trump is at the White House and he is setting in motion the turning back of abortion on the day of the turning. And then we got to the end part, and I'm on the mall, and I said, now we're going to seal it with God's sign, the trumpet, shofars. We had about 6 men up there. I said, now we seal it. Shout when you hear it, Jericho. And I said, now go forth the power of God. And I said, go. And the exact time code was 5 o'clock, 4 minutes, and 33 seconds. At the White House, at the same exact moment, Trump opens his mouth and he begins, the overturning of abortion began at 5 p.m., 4 minutes and 33 seconds on the day of turning, at the moment of turning, with the child of the Nile at his side. Jehu, everything came together to that moment.
Irrefutable proof. Let's look at that actual miraculous footage right now.
From here, and Lord, as we seal the return and the power of God, Now, Lord, let the sound of your power go forth to the world. In Jesus, Yeshua's name, go.
I stand before you today to fulfill one of my highest and most important duties under the United States Constitution, the nomination of a Supreme Court Justice.
What can we expect? Expect the same end-time glory that was released on the White House, that was released in Cuba right here next.
Right back to It's Supernatural.
I'm going to tell you about one of the most unique, exclusive, prophetic things that I believe you're not going to want to miss, and that you can't get in any store, not on Amazon or anywhere. The Josiah Manifesto Uncensored. This is the only source of the uncensored material. With 8 one-hour DVDs, I'm going to be sharing with you the deep revelations of God I can't share elsewhere, and not only the deeper revelations of the mysteries in the book, but I'm going to open up entirely other mysteries. And you're not only going to read of the mysteries, you're going to actually see them unfold before your eyes. You're going to see prophetic manifestations, even that of an ancient god or spirit on the streets of New York City. You're going to actually see the event, the prophetic moment that altered the course of history of America, and much, much more. And I'm going to be sharing what you need to know to be prepared, to stand, to survive, to prevail in the days ahead, in the last days, and in all that is yet to come.
We now return to It's Supernatural.
Jonathan, what are the prophetic ramifications of the Josiah moment?
Yeah, this is where it all comes, and the book is revealing where we are and what's ahead of us. What we are in is this Josiah moment, which is a crucial moment, really the most critical moment, because Josiah, not only he lived at the end of the kingdom, so it was a kingdom that had fallen from God in apostasy, actually dealt with gender and dealt with offering children, and it was heading to judgment. And so on one hand, the sign of the broken altar is linked to judgment, but it's also linked to revival. One person here. So the thing is that the whole nation was hanging in the balance. And I believe right now America and also others are hanging in the balance, and God's people are critical. And the thing is that, we are even seeing God's people who are kind of being swept away by the darkness while others are standing stronger. So this is going to separate. The grays are disappearing, and the dark is going to get darker, the light is going to get lighter. And that is why we're talking about all these mysteries today. All these things are leading to really a message from God. And that's why much of the last part of the book, which is the last third, is all about the manual for God's Josiahs right now. Whoever you are, God has a plan, and we have to pray for this nation because that's where we are. But what do we do? And can we actually change history? That's what the manifesto, that's what it's all about.
Well, I believe that we're about to see history changed. What are some of the revelations revealed in the manifesto?
Well, it's number one, it's going to tell us how to live as, the mystery to the book of Acts, because we have to live that way now, and there has to be, and we have to know, we have to take a stand, and we have to become radical, revolutionary. This faith has to return to where it was at the beginning, which is the book of Acts. That's where the power and that's where the spirit is. And so Josiah was revolutionary. And I want to, there's so many things in the manifesto that I want people to have. But what I want to say is one part. In the midst of his life, he was led to go to Bethel. There was an altar there. He struck down the altars. And at that point, a man turns to him and says, this is the place where the man prophesied you would come there. A man named Josiah would come and do what you did. In other words, centuries before Josiah did that, it was prophesied. He was a person of destiny. Okay, and one of the things about the manifesto is, how do you find your destiny in a time in such as this? These are evil times, but it didn't stop the light of God. It didn't stop Josiah fulfilling his calling. Nothing can stop you fulfilling your calling in God. Nothing can stop the purposes of God either. And there's a way to do that. There's a way to do it. One of the things it says in the manifesto is that Josiah was born for his age. He was appointed. He didn't just live. We are appointed for this age. Everyone watching, you were appointed to live for this age, and you have a job to do. We have a job to do in this earth. And the thing is that, and there is a destiny as well. And the question is, can one person actually change history? The answer is yes. Josiah was one person, and he changed the history of his nation. You are, whoever's watching, you are one person. And we are together, we are powerful. One person can change the world. 12 people can change the world. 12 disciples can change the world. And this generation. So each of us, we were appointed. So don't fear the end times. And don't say, I wish I was living in some other time. God chose you to be living in this day and age. So this is just a small taste of the manifesto. But what do we need? There are specific things we need to do. But God has a plan. God knows the plan. God has the way. And that's what's going to be revealed at the end of the Josiah Manifesto.
And I have a word for you. God has not given up on you. No matter how far away you are from God, his heart is still reaching out. No matter what you've done, his heart is still reaching out to you and wants to embrace you with a love that you've never experienced before. Something happened in Cuba that is a foretaste of hope for the world in the midst of such darkness.
We began, Sid, in Cuba. When you asked me, you handed something to Fidel Castro that was actually a sign of how much time he would have. Well, at the very beginning, when I was asked to come and open up this month of celebration in Cuba of the gospel, freedom for the first time for 1 month. And it was the theme was Jubilee, Jubilee, Jubilee. And when I that night, the first night, I was asked to speak to this night gathering. And that night, God revealed himself in a way I've never seen. And that is that I had the message I was going to share, I was led to share, was the message of Joel. If you'll come back to God, if you'll repent, for a nation or for a person, God is going to restore the years the locusts have eaten. God's going to break the curse. God's going to open the heavens, and he's going to pour out the Spirit and blessings. So I'm ready to do that, Sid. And I have my talit, I have my shofar, which we have here because we're going to do it. And the thing is that as I'm about to, before I could even get to the stage, all of a sudden there's a plague of insects. Now Joel opens up with a plague of insects. All of a sudden, I was swarming over everybody. I open up the Bible to Joel, and the insects are landing on the scriptures about the insects. And then it says it's a day of darkness, and the next thing happens, everything goes dark. Everybody's in dark, and they're praying, and these are Christians. They're praying and praying. And then I won't even go into even more happened with a light. I won't even do that. But I get up on the stage, and now I'm going to speak about Joel. Now, if I had spoken about tomato farming, they would have repented at that stage. But the thing is, I'm speaking, and I say, God's going to open the heaven. The next thing in Joel is they're repenting. So they're praying repentance. That's the key. Repent and pray for revival. So we are. Then all of a sudden, I said, I'm going to sound the shofar. I sound the shofar. I said, let the power of God, like in Washington. And all of a sudden, the heavens open up, and rain comes on everyone. The next thing in Joel, it says, I will open the heavens and bring rain. Then I said, it just stops then. I said, you know what? God's going to bring revival like that. I leave the stage, and about 20 minutes later, Joel says, a second rain, the latter rain. The second rain comes, the latter rain comes, and now it comes as a little drop, then it becomes a downpour, then a deluge, and then it explodes into deluge, and the people don't leave because as the rain came down, God says, I will pour out my Spirit on all flesh, and all of a sudden the rain is coming, and the Spirit's coming, and the people are exploding in worship, the children are worshiping, they never left. And this revival broke out in Cuba on the day of Joel. And so God was saying, they called it the unforgettable night in Cuba. And the thing is, I said, Lord, what's that about? He said, this is what's coming. I promised there was one outpouring. In Israel, there's two pourings, the former rains and the latter rains. There was one outpouring. God says, I'm giving another one. So listen, everybody, God has promised that for us. We have to pray for it. We have to be like Joel. But whatever you have to do in your life, get it right. Go full blast for God. Turn to God. God says, I will open the heavens on your life and on the nation and on the world.
And I believe that'll happen as Jonathan blows that shofar.
This is the shofar. And by the way, what I gave to Fidel Castro was a shofar. One of the things I gave.
That's my father's talit. You be careful, Jonathan.
That's more pressure. And this is the sign of God's power. And we're going to pray right now for the power of God to come upon the earth of the world, to pray for the end time revival, to pray for revival in America, and to pray for revival in your life and all that you need. Lift up your hands to the Lord, be consecrated to him, and receive as from the Lord. The sound. In the name of Yeshua, we declare the power of God and revival, the end-time outpouring, Father, and your power for each one right now in the name of Messiah.